Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We have already a good number of people who registered, who joined, even more than that. So let us start this fifth internal cluster meeting, where we want to exchange together, brainstorm on an important topic for all those who have been working on sustainable development related issues. You might recall that from early stages, one of the key tools we had identified to effectively implement sustainability are the procurement and labeling, green public procurement, then sustainable public procurement, and eco-labeling. And they remain key tools. And in most of the countries, when we go and tell them, where can we provide a support? Curiously, after 10, 15, 20 years of work on that, the reply is, can you help us in procurement and labeling? Which shows how complex the process is, still how important it is. It takes time to understand it, to implement it, to find the right institution, but also to find the right stakeholders. When we talk about procurement and labeling, we start always with the government framework, government legislations, expecting that it will trickle down to the market, which is not the case. Then we try to negotiate better with the private sector. And ultimately, we understood that this is a completely multi-stakeholder issue, where the government need to consult with the private sector and other actors in order to effectively define the right elements of the procurement system that we need there, and then look how to implement it, how the market can reply to that or to adapt to that. So we will hear a lot about those issues. My intention is not to talk to present to you green and sustainable public procurement challenges and opportunities, but just to say it's crucial. It is recognized worldwide. It is one of the elements in the 10YFP program as one of the working stream. It is well recognized in the SDG 12 as one of the targets. And many countries are working on that. A few examples will be provided to you here. Without any further ado, let me go now on the housekeeping issue before giving the floor to Alessandra. Please, the session will be recorded, and you will get soon after the meeting, a few days after, the link to look at it, listen to it, use it as much as you want. As you have all of you done, and please keep on doing it, keep on mute if you don't speak. Oh, one is unmute. So keep mute if you don't speak, and when you speak, of course, unmute and put your video so that people can see you, unless you have a limited connection or problem with the connection, not good networking. We can understand that you won't have your video. We will have questions as much as possible, so raise hand or use the chat, and we will be sharing all the elements on the website. Next. As I said earlier, we are here to really look at the green sustainable public procurement and its opportunities for collaboration. As I said, it cannot be done by one entity in a country, by one ministry, by one stakeholder. It's really something that requires all concerned stakeholders to sit together to define exactly their needs and to define how to effectively implement procurement, and how then, if I want to extend to labeling. So synergies and partnership are absolutely essential within the country, within a region, and at the global level, as in the context of the 10YFP. Next, please. The session will be, or the meeting will be in three sessions mainly. One, we will have three very important opening speeches that will explain to us or share with us how Europe is proceeding, then how we are proceeding at the global level, and what's the status in Asia. Next one, we will have the session which will be the core, in fact, the raison d'etre on why we are coming today. We are bringing the examples of related work to procurement at country level through national support, all with our grant project, which are the main elements of the Switch Asia program, and exchanging between them, breaking silos and creating synergies. And the last one will be a panel discussion where we'll be learning from previous two, and we will have this discussion that will be moderated by my colleague Anne. And there is a number of questions that we have been providing in all sessions. The questions are guiding. We don't stick to them, but as much as we can reply to them, why not? And otherwise, we will allow ourselves to move to other questions. And please, among the participants and the speakers, do not shy from asking your colleague a question. Don't wait for us to raise hands about that. Without any further ado, let us move to the welcome remarks by Alessandra Lepore, who is the International Cooperation Officer, the Green Economy, Sustainable Consumption Production at the European Commission, Director General for International Partnership. I believe you all know, but if you don't know, Alessandra is the one in charge of the whole program, and she has been leading it, as we say in French, the main de maître properly, or guiding it properly, and ensuring that we effectively have this interconnection and interrelation between the three components, which are essential for the program. So Alessandra is in charge of the coordination of the whole program in 24 countries, 10 years of experience, research, innovation, industrial development, both public and private sector in Europe and Asia. Alessandra, please welcome for your remarks.
Many thanks, Arab. I think too kind. I think Switch is to me really a teamwork with all of you, and that's why I'm really glad to see all of you around, and also colleagues from delegations. Good afternoon, good morning, and to everyone. Nice to see some known faces. Nice to see also new faces. Always good to know more and better colleagues working on Switch Asia, around Asia and Europe for our program. Well, Arab introduced myself. What I would like to say, and I'm glad to see also them connected today, is that I'm not the only person working in the European Commission on Switch Asia, but I do work with colleagues in every single delegation in the country. So it's about 20 people working with me. A good teamwork also done by the facility led by Arab. So I really want to also highlight the presence of my colleagues in delegations, which are very important, and then probably are more known to you than I am, because you're daily in contact with them. So they're a big and important part then of the program, definitely. For me, the idea today, of course, is welcoming remark from the EU to highlight also to you and frame a bit better today's meeting to you. Since this year, the program introduced the concept of thematic clusters, which are regular meetings that we hold with our grantees and the representative of the 24 countries we are working with. So national governments, regional organizations, and also external partners that you've seen from the agenda, international organizations equally, let's say, engaged as the EU and Switch Asia in the region to support sustainable consumption and production. The objective of this meeting are actually to enable stakeholders in the region to confront themselves, to learn from each other, to create also regional knowledge instead of working in silos in every of the 24 countries. For us, it's very important that the knowledge that through Switch we gather locally is then shared to learn more about each other's experiences, to see how we can advance in key sectors of sustainable consumption and production. Among these thematic clusters, we already, as Arab said, we already hold few ones, for instance, on textile, agri-food, constructions. We will soon have one on plastics and waste, and of course on green sustainable public procurement and eco-labeling today. I think that Arab already highlighted the importance for them as a key driver for the green and sustainable transition in the region. And that, of course, they are also part of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, being identified as a key target of SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production. This is also the reason why green public procurement, sustainable public procurement, eco-labeling is a key priority for Switch Asia and for the EU and the region, and we are committed then through the program to support the development or the, let's say, the progress of this topic in the region. We still see barriers, but also opportunities. We also recognize the opportunities that they represent in Asia. Through our program, we are already supporting several national governments like India, Indonesia, Thailand, and Mongolia. And we also run numerous projects in Central Asia and India or Lao PDR. So I'm very glad to see that you accepted the invitation today to come and present your work and share your experience, and how the EU is then supporting the progress of green public procurement in the region. A last point for me, I also would like to thank a colleague, Anna Lupi, who will take the floor just after me. This is very important to us as a Switch Asia also to work very close to all the line DGs of the European Commission, because we actually work overall as the EU under the framework of the European Green Deal, so supporting the green transition, not just within our member states, but also in the cooperation with our third countries. And Anna will also be instrumental for us to know and to understand the priorities that the EU has in terms of green public procurement, how we are working locally, and eventually how this work can be better organized also through Switch in the future with you. So with no further hesitation, I don't want to take the time from you, the experts of today. I just want to thank as you and my colleagues of delegation you for the participation. And thanks for the also for your knowledge that you're bringing to our program. And I wish you all a very fruitful discussions, and we look forward and to continue them also in the next month. Thank you very much.
Alessandra, thank you very much for this welcoming remarks, setting the framework and setting the tone on what we are going to talk about. Of course, the EU has been leading in the SCP program in general and on green and sustainable public procurement in particular. So let us hear from Anna Lupi, the Legal and Policy Officer in Public Procurement Unit, DG for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, called as DG GROW in European Commission. Anna has been working in DG GROW on public procurement law and policy for 6 years. She is in charge of the Commission's policy on sustainable public procurement, coordinating awareness-raising initiatives on the topic and the creation of supporting tools for public buyers. She has also dealt with a number of EU member states as a desk officer, so she knows very well the context. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arab, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be with you today. Today I want to maybe give you a little bit of an overview of what we do in the field of sustainable public procurement within the EU, but also a bit maybe where we come from, so that you better understand the context. And I just want to start maybe with something that seems, well, obvious to me, but is not really always obvious to everybody, especially if you're not directly involved with public procurement. And the very simple element here is that public procurement is an important driver of our economies. It can have a huge impact. In the EU, we estimate that about 14% of our GDP is spent through procurement. And this is a conservative estimate. So, and of course, when we talk about public procurement in the EU, we talk about public authorities purchasing a wide range of products, services, and works. So imagine the impact that using this sort of economic lever can have when you want to reach a specific objective. And in this case, one of our main objectives indeed is sustainable public procurement, with the idea that we can use public procurement as a way to support green and social policy objectives. So the idea that we really want to put at the forefront of our policies when it comes to public procurement is that procurement is not just a financial tool. It's not just a tool to purchase something that is useful for society or for the public administration, but it's really a tool for policy making. Of course, this means that public procurement procedures, which are already, and I'm sure that this is true across the world, that they are already quite complex. They become even more complex because you have to think about how to make sure that what you buy is indeed sustainable or socially responsible. So why does it make sense to go the extra mile and make the extra effort in this case? The way we see it, procurement can really help address some of our environmental, social, and ethical issues. Of course, you need to be able, as a public buyer, to understand a little bit what are the risks involved when you purchase something for your community. You can also use public procurement as a lever to, of course, stimulate sustainable markets. So you are effectively, when you're using green and social requirements in public procurement, you are pushing businesses to be a bit more sustainable. So you're incentivizing sustainability in the market, and that brings a lot of benefits, not only in terms of improving sustainability, but you're also effectively in the long term boosting the international competitiveness of your own industry. We also see sustainable public procurement as a way to increase trust in governments. You are basically also passing the message to your citizens that you are upholding the values that you're working for. So this let's say increases trust in the institutions, and also is a possibly also a factor of transparency with suppliers, because you are communicating the fact that you want your suppliers to partner with you in reaching sustainability objectives. It's also a way to ensure effective public expenditure. I mean, we all have limited economic resources and budgets, so we need to really do our best to spend them and to tackle as many issues as possible with a single procurement procedure. So by thinking a little bit about sustainability when you are purchasing something for your community, you're also providing additional benefits for that community beyond the purchase of the single service, product, or work. And finally, there are also reasons of policy consistency. I mean, you buy as you preach. If your government pursues sustainability objectives, then it doesn't make sense not to buy sustainably, because through buying sustainably, you're also pursuing these same objectives. Maybe a word about what we do in concrete terms in the EU. So we have at European level, we have different instruments regulating public procurement. It's regulated through 3 directives in particular, which are fairly specific. And then each member state can implement these directives with a little bit of flexibility. But let's say that these directives, although they go very much into the specifics of of the procedural issues of public procurement, they don't go into, they don't, let's say, interfere with the decisions of a single public buyer on what to buy. So they don't tell public buyers that they have to buy by using green and social considerations. They sort of like lay the legal basis that allows them to do so, and they encourage public buyers to use green and social considerations. But the ultimate choice of which green and social considerations to use in the single procurement is up to the buyers. And this is because, of course, it's for the buyers to know what are the needs that they need to satisfy, what are the risks that they need to address, and what are the most appropriate environmental and social considerations that they can use in their procurement. There is an exception to this, let's say, optional element of sustainable procurement, which is, of course, compliance with environmental, social, and labor law. Wherever you have national or European or even international legal obligations. For example, this can be linked to rules on emissions or on recycling. It can be labor rules regulating working conditions or health and safety, or rules on equality in the workplace. These have to be complied. These are not optional. I also try to represent a little bit and try to give you some concrete examples in the presentation of what we mean exactly when we say that public buyers in the EU are doing sustainable procurement. We often recur to these two categories of green public procurement and socially responsible public procurement. And the idea is really that for green public procurement, you pursue, you try to buy in a way that does not harm the environment, and wherever possible, it produces benefits to the environment. And for socially responsible public procurement, the idea is a little bit that you, as a public buyer, you want to pursue social objectives and have a social impact when you are when you're purchasing something. So we have these two concepts, which are, let's say, complementary to each other. They are not strictly defined because, again, this is it's a little bit up to the public buyer to pick and choose what is appropriate depending on the type of purchase. But just to give you a few examples, for example, in green public procurement, you may want to require, in the context of a public procurement procedure, that all of the offers respect a ceiling for CO2 emissions for the provision of a certain product or services. You can require a certain device to be designed in a way that is that prevents repairs, or it doesn't have to be disposed of in a very short period of time. You can require also, for example, in the context of I don't know, a catering contract, to dispose of the food waste in a certain way, or to dispose of the plastic waste in a certain way. And you can, for example, require or award more points in the evaluation phase to components of a product or of a service which carry a specific environmental label. And in the field of social procurement, you can, for example, require certain elements which allow for further integration of disadvantaged groups. For example, you can require the contractor to reserve certain posts of employment in the execution of the contract for disadvantaged people. You can require the contractor to provide specific training to reskill the workforce that's working on the contract. You can require a certain service to be performed inclusively. Again, for example, in a catering service, you can require that there's that people of different faiths are being able to have dishes that respect their beliefs. Or you can also, and this is a fairly new tendency, but it's becoming more and more important in the EU. You can require more transparency in supply chain and the commitment from both your contractor and your subcontractor to try to comply with human rights standards. One issue that is incredibly important in the way we treat sustainable public procurement in the EU is, of course, the level of integration and harmonization and cooperation, let's say, between the different member states and the member states and us as Commission. Of course, having had a harmonized legal framework since the 1970s, this provides the basis to have a common internal market, but more importantly, it also allows us to better disseminate good practices and cooperate on common issues and challenges. And just to give you an idea, there are two examples recently of how this is occurring in the EU. For example, we have EU-funded projects that bring together different member states, like Finland and Sweden, on a common challenge that they have. In this case, they wanted to tackle unemployment through public procurement. So they wanted to create employment opportunities for very specific groups of their population and in very specific types of contracts. And they were brought together by this project, and they could share good practices and come to share solutions for their problems. And something similar also happens with this big buyer project that we have right now, which essentially brings together buyers from different parts of the EU, and they basically sit around a same thematic table, and they discuss their needs and their challenges, and they try to come up with solutions that could be workable for everybody. To conclude, maybe a word on the support tools that we have at European level for public buyers. Hopefully you will get the presentation, so you will be able to access all the links. We have some guidances on green public procurement and on social public procurement for public buyers. We have a guidance on circular procurement. We have several good practices examples, both for green public procurement and socially responsible procurement. We have a training toolkit for buyers, in particular on green public procurement. And we have a set of, let's say, voluntary green public procurement criteria. These are standard criteria that we develop together with essentially with scientists and with stakeholders. Again, these are not compulsory; they are voluntary, and they have a sectorial dimension. So you will be able to find more than 20 sectors and different products that are covered by these criteria. And the idea is really for the criteria to be picked and chosen by public buyers, depending on their needs again. So thank you very much, and of course, if you have questions or want to contact me, I'll be available in the chat.
Anna, thank you very much. Thank you for showing how far the EU has gone in this very important subject, and as I said earlier, how they could be leading by example. For the colleagues who will be speaking after Alessandra has put a question in the chat, if you can, during your presentation, just think about it on how much the approach proposed by Anna on behalf of the EU, of course, reflects the national policies in your countries and what would be needed for you to go to that level, which is part of our of the program that we'll be handling. Next, let us move to the global level. Farid Yaker, a Program Officer, Economic and Trade Policy Unit, Economy Division at UNEP and One Planet Network. I will have difficulties introducing him and the next one because we are close friends for many years. But Farid has been leading the work of UNEP in the area of sustainable public procurement since 2008. And he, before joining UNEP, he has been a very active member of ENDA, Environment Development Action. After he attended the Rio Summit in '92, he managed important programs for the promotion of participatory approaches in the field of urban environment, 94-99, and he took the direction of European Office of ENDA before joining UNEP in 2008. Farid, please give us where do we stand with the global picture, and I know that you will deliver a statement based on the question that we raised. Farid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arab. And I must say that when I joined UNEP in 2008, I found a boss there whose name was Arab Haballah, and it has been a great pleasure working with him and actually establishing the basis of our involvement on sustainable procurement. So, you know, our involvement, our work, our action on sustainable procurement dates back from 2005, and Arab was instrumental in pushing forward already back then for sustainable procurement. Excuse me, but I'm going to turn off just the video because, or maybe I can leave it. It's all right. We're going to try. Yeah? I'm just afraid, you know, we have a low signal. So where we are in terms of implementation, I'm happy to announce, and I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise for you, that SPP is on the rise everywhere, even though we should recognize that it is stronger for the moment in developed and industrialized countries. But really, we can say that the $1 trillion giant is awakening, and that this tool, SPP or GPP, has become a recognized and needed tool to address our sustainable development challenges. And one testimony to that is the fact that SPP is one of the targets of the SDGs. It is target 12.7 with the indicator 12.7.1 that measures the number of countries implementing SPP policies. And most of you probably know that UNEP has developed the methodology to measure 12.71 and that we have done already the first data collection exercise. So I'm pleased to give you some of the feedback of this exercise, which will give us an idea of where we stand in terms of implementation. So we received 40 submissions, which we find a good number from national governments. And this is the geographical distribution. We have 3 submissions from Africa. We have 6 from Asia, 7 from Latin America, 2 from North America. I mean, the US and Canada are there. And then we have 22 from Europe. So we can see really the strength of GPP or SPP in Europe, which has been supported, of course, by the European Commission, as was pointed earlier. However, we see, and we were happy to see that there is a good number coming from either Latin America or Asia, and that implementation is taking place also in developing countries. Also in Asia, we have the 3 traditional leaders, but we're pleased to see that the Philippines is also in the list of complying countries. Unfortunately, we didn't receive submission from Thailand, who we know is also a good student on SPP implementation. I have also to mention that we had an excellent response rate from local governments with 39 submissions from provinces or municipality, which attests to the progress of SPP at local level. Probably Philip will speak on that. So in terms of governments that is needed for GPP, SPP, I would like first to point to the challenges we're facing that most of you know. First of all, we still have the price and availability of greener products challenge, i.e. the market challenge. In terms of price, I think we have to need to move really rapidly to total cost of ownership and then to internalize externalities. Why? We have to really to give a price to carbon. We have to give a price to the loss of biodiversity to make sure that the products that really are the less impactful of those impacts have a better price in tenders and can be picked compared to products that are more impactful. It's complicated to internalize externalities, but it's happening. The EU is showing the way, as has been demonstrated earlier in terms of putting in place life cycle costing tools. So this is the road we have to go. It takes time, it's complex, but we have no choice. And also we have to look at prices in a dynamic way. When the demand is here, investment comes and prices tend to go down. We have witnessed that for many commodities. We've seen that for paper. Recycled paper was much more expensive than conventional paper. Now they're almost at par. We've seen it for green gloves and so for many other products. We shouldn't be afraid to pay a premium at the beginning because this will attract investments and price will go down. So you understand that the demand factor is critical. So we need one to aggregate demand signals from the public, private, and individuals to have the strongest demand signal. But we also need to send consistent demand signals to the market. And this means harmonizing purchasing criteria, harmonizing standards and eco-labels, use of common core criteria, mutual recognition, etc., which is happening also in the Asian region. The second challenge is the resistance from contracting authorities and procurers. And here we have really the role of political willingness, capacity building, things that you are doing also through Switch Asia. And also maybe really push for mandatory green procurement, which is on the rise throughout the world. It's largely the case in many Asian countries, but it's also happening now in Europe. There's a recognition that we have to move towards a more mandatory approach. And this will help also procurers. In terms of the governance, what is the scheme that we favor based on our experience? We believe that we need first a good collaboration and division of work between public institutions. Finance, Public Procurement Authority on the one hand, environment, especially for the sustainability standards, social affairs and the economy and industry ministries, and the fourth pillar, social affairs is the fourth pillar. The four pillars have to be there to make sure that we have really a strong setup and strong configuration to support sustainable procurement. We also need good dialogue with the private sector, and this in order to prioritize products with the private sector to agree on the priority product. This is something the EU is doing very well. The EU it has been said earlier, has 20 or 22 product groups which have been prioritized. There is common or consultations of the private sector in the definition of the purchasing criteria. So this is happening, and then signals are being sent out to the private sector, to the productive sector, so that they can get ready to supply the goods. We need also to use complementary instruments such as green taxation to bring down the prices of green goods, and also of course, supplier development policies. Third, we have to coordinate the demand to send strong and consistent signals to the market. This was said earlier. And then monitoring is a key issue. It's quite weak on SPP and GPP. We don't know how much of procurement is green, and the sustainability impacts even less. And finally, I will end with good international cooperation to learn from each other and support each other, something Switch Asia is doing, but also to ensure a coordinated and stronger international demand for green goods and harmonized eco-labels. And here, donor countries have the great role to play to fund networks that support SPP implementation. We should thank the EU in this matter for its financial and technical support, but also other countries like the Republic of Korea, which are funding the Asia-Pacific GPP network led by UNEP. And I must say that in the list of developing countries who are complying now with the 12.71 indicator and whom submitted their report, there's a lot of countries that were supported on SPP through donor cooperation. So I will finish with the question of what is the right institution to support GPP and SPP. And you have understood it from what I said earlier. It cannot be a single institution. SPP is a marriage between procurement function, which is traditional under Ministry of Finance, and then sustainability, which is under Environment and Social Affairs. However, also buying means that there is a vendor, so the ministries in charge of supporting the private sector should also be involved. So the key to success is a good coordination and division of tasks between those ministries, and also good complementarity and synergies between SPP policies. That's also critical. Energy efficiency, green fiscal policies, circular, green economy have to be complementary and support each other. Sorry, the last point is about green recovery and the areas we should focus on. Green recovery is a major opportunity to push forward on SPP. However, few developing countries have been able to establish recovery plans because of lack of resources. In developing countries, we did an analysis with Oxford's economic recovery project, and we found out that only 18% of announced recovery spending can be considered green, and this is in developed countries. So we believe that efforts should be put in priority on impactful sectors such as construction. The construction sector is essential for economic recovery. It can create rapidly large amounts of jobs, and it involves far-reaching value chains of small and large businesses. At the same time, the sector presents a massive and largely unused opportunity to respond to climate crisis. And you should know that the construction and operation of buildings is responsible for 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, even more than transport or industry. And this trend is accelerating as the building floor area is set to double by 2060, and energy demand in this sector is growing fast. So really the building sector holds the potential for a double win, providing a powerful tool to stimulate the economy while moving the whole sector to new and greener state. And then, so the launch of public procurement programs that could enhance energy efficiency in public buildings, schools, hospitals, or administrative buildings really can be particularly impactful. Second one is the public transport that can create and maintain jobs more quickly than any other transportation investments. So beyond being a green stimulus investment, public transport offers wider benefits to society because it is more efficient than private vehicle use. It emits less greenhouse gas per person and less pollutions. So we're thinking of encouraging compact transit-oriented policies to encourage walking and biking, and that can make for healthier residents. And public transport can also provide more equitable access to jobs and education and services than large highway networks. So we are really calling for governments and development banks to make public transport an integral part of stimulus packages for economic recovery by creating high quality bus and transport infrastructure, modernizing and electrifying bus fleets, investing in cycling and walking routes, and building robust electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And the last sector is energy efficient products, because we believe that governments should mandate the sustainable procurement of high impact electrical products, such as energy efficient lighting, refrigerators, room air conditioners, electric motors, distribution transformers, all the products that really together represent more than 1/3 of global energy consumption, and even more in Asia for example, air conditioners, and which have the potential really to considerably reduce GHG emissions and at the same time lead to substantial financial savings for state and semi-state entities due to, of course, the lower energy consumption. I've been a bit long. I would like to apologize for that, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Farid. I will not attempt to summarize. I will just say this is the road to go, and we have to keep on going. I mean, just taking some of your words, and the priority sector for green recovery, which are effectively considered in various countries. Let us move now from Europe, from the global to the Asia, which is bringing us together here. Sanjay Kumar, the Green Public Procurement Expert, General Manager, Minister of Railways, India, and President of the Asia Pacific Roundtable for Sustainable Consumption Production Board of Trustees. Sanjay has over 2 decades of governance and leadership experience in public policy, procurement, and sustainability. And his vision, leadership, and dedicated effort has been pivotal for the growth of sustainable purchasing movement in the region. And he is currently the president of the Board of Trustees of the Asia Pacific Roundtable on SCP. He has been a major actor in Asia, and he's well known for his work on procurement. Sanjay, the floor is yours. If you can be a little bit more efficient than previous ones, I will be very, very thankful.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share my experience on GPP implementation in Asia. So let's go now. So if you look at the GPP experience in Asia during the last 20 years, we all know that Japan was the champion, and they came up first in 2002 with a legislation that was the first of its kind to procure a eco-innovative product or eco-labeling product. And later on, motivated by the Japan X and many other countries in the region, they joined the the movement, I will say. And subsequently, the different countries has been joining at different point of time. But it would be naive to fit country GPP journey on a timeline like this, because if you look at the sectoral legislation to support local industries, SMEs, etc., through professional procurement, they were already present in the much before before the origin of the GPP per se. For example, in South Korea, they had a preference procurement guidelines, sectoral guidelines for procurement from the goods manufactured by the army veterans. Similarly, in India, since 1951, we have a preferential procurement system for buying certain goods from the small and middle industries. So, although we say that this is a movement on the GPP, we should be cautious when we are saying that at which point of time different countries joined this movement. And look at this country, what has happened during the last 20 years, depending on the leadership support and level of commitment of the government and, the organization who are leading the initiative. Different organization or different country per se are at different level of GPP implementation. And many of the countries in the region still, the level of, they have some kind of confusion, and, we are trying to create the awareness and understanding, and many of the countries, they have moved ahead. They have, legislation on the GPP. Recently, Philippines in 2019, although they were doing a lot of work since 2009 and 2010, but finally they could have the legislation in 2019. I am sure that will help in, institutionalizing the GPP into Philippines at all level of the government. But we have a long way to go. And further we see, look at this picture. If we say that the GPP, Green Public Procurement or Sustainable Public Procurement, when we consider the environmental and social aspect, then you see the different states of green. It's not that all countries are at the same level. Some of the countries, as I say in the previous slides, they have much moved ahead. But there are countries who have prioritized only 2 items or 2 category items or 3 category items. And at the same time, I see that there are many countries about which we don't have knowledge. Don't have knowledge in the sense that do they have some kind of sectoral legislation, or they have some kind of sectoral policy which promote SPP in some form or other? We don't have knowledge. So we need to again work on that. So based on the last 3 slides which I have presented, these are my general observation. If you look at the country in the Asia, most of the countries has adopted their program based on their national energy and eco level of the countries. right? Which has certain limitation in the sense it could be applied for, few product category only. And then again, the second observation is they have used only tender specification stage of the procurement cycle, and they have been unable to make the opportunity which are available at different, stage of the procurement cycle. Which is there at the, at the time of selection of suppliers, which is there available at the time of award of the contract, and during the contract conditions and monitoring and so on. And third observation is, in most countries, right, the emphasis on the product and to some extent on services like cleaning services and so on. But big ticket impact category, as mentioned by the, Faid in the earlier discussion, he said this is missing from, in most of the countries, right? And that is a area where we need to progress and where we need to attack, And the fourth one is, the measurement of GPP is only through the process indicators. In the sense, what is the percentage of goods procured with the GPP criteria? That is not, we are not able to measure the outcome. Say how much GHG emission we have reduced, or how much waste generation, we have minimized, or how much employment we have provided to the people as a result of inserting a social clause in a particular procurement decision. And finally, this is very important, EU Switch Asia has played a big role. I must say here that except Japan, right, all the countries which we have seen the last map, EU has played some role in some or another way. All the countries. So thank you, EU, for the great support which you have been providing on the GPP implementation in all countries in the Asia. So how do we move forward? Obviously, we need to go ahead and mainstream GPP in a much wider sense. So here are my key suggestions, right? We need to recognize that one strategy does not work in all countries, right? What has been our approach? We have a single approach that bring GPP policy framework and develop product criteria for prioritized group. This is a single strategy we have been following in all the countries, right? But we need to understand that, policy from one country to the other could be transposed, but practices can't be transposed, right? It has to be contextualized. So we need to understand what is the, appetite of a country to take the, greener condition or the social condition. Maybe we need to find out, and my hunch is poor and middle income countries might be more interested in integrating social criteria first, instead of pushing them with the environmental criteria and adopt the GPP practices, right? So this is my one suggestion. We need to look at the countries, and then accordingly, we should advise the course of action. The second is, don't make promises that can't be delivered. And let us be upfront about the cost of sustainable product and services. I have some reservation about the cost. GPP advocates and sustainable procurement advocates have all along been advocating that the cost of sustainable goods and services does not increase as a result, or it is more or less same with the conventional product. But the consumer has a different experience. You go to the supermarket, you go and buy the organic foods and products. Their mostly price tag is more than 40 to 50%. So they don't believe you, right? So what we need to do is we need to talk about the cost, right? But we need to stress that when we talk about the cost, we need to be aware that who is bearing the cost. There is always a cost. In a conventional product also there is a cost, but who is bearing it, right? It's a society who is bearing it, right? So, and we need to minimize the cost to the society as a result of our procurement decision, right? So that consumer and manufacturer, they bear the cost, not the society, right? Thirdly, we need to scale up, right? So if we look at how the GPP is implemented in a country, if you want to implement GPP in a country, of course, you need the support of the top management, political leadership at the stage of policy and strategy, right? Then comes the procurement leadership, because they are the one who are going to, gear the procurement process toward, implementing your policy and strategy, whatever you devise. And thirdly, it is a people, people who is working on a daily basis, right? They are integrating procurement or sustainability criteria in different stages of the procurement cycle, right? So what has been our problem? If you look at our overall emphasis, a major emphasis till now is on the policy and strategy. We are focusing a lot, we are giving a lot of attention on policy and strategy, which we should. I'm not saying that we should not, but at the same time, we need to, when we want to move ahead, we need to start focusing on the procurement leadership and focusing on the people, right? Unless we empower the people, unless we empower the people with the right kinds of knowledge, right kinds of information, and right kinds of tools, it will be very difficult for any country to move ahead on the SPP implementation part. We need to professionalize the procurement function so that they are able to able to identify the opportunity which are available at different stages of procurement, and they are able to enhance the successful outcome of the procurement decision. So when it comes to governance, like how do we need to govern the SPP implementation? So any thinking on the governance, when we are saying it needs to encompass all three. That means top management, procurement leaders, and people who are managing the daily procurement on a day-to-day basis. And finally, we have been trying to adopt, GP practices based on the project, right? And the project timeline is roughly about 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 year at the base. But we should understand that, it doesn't work like that, right? When you are trying to promote only the GPP, right? Because if you want to change a procurement system in any country, if you want to change the legislation in any country, it takes much longer time, right? So we need to move from the project-based approach, focusing only on the GPP, to program-based approach, which encompasses, which has a long-term view, and at the same time, it encompasses several other things. While we are trying to focus on GPP, we are focusing only on the demand side. But what about the supply side? Right? Are we, do we have complementary program to address and support the vendors in the country or in the region? So we need to think about it. And secondly, invest in institution building to develop local capacity. I think this is the area, Farid also mentioned, we need to develop this leadership capacity institution and network in the region. That we have not been able to do in the last 20 years. And even though we have one or two, they have been mostly, dysfunctional. They have not been functioning at the ground level. And the third is, it was mentioned and flagged by, I think, Farid also, and the earlier speaker also, Anna also, need to have the collaboration between academia and the business. There are many things on many issues in the GPP implementation which we don't understand, right? So where are the academia? Are they coming up with the research? Are they analyzing why some countries have progressed well and why some countries are not picking up? We don't have. And similarly, business, right? I don't know how many, audiences are from the business today in this conversation, right? We understand that as a government or as a, whatever we call as an expert, we know everything. We don't know everything. We don't know what is the motivation of the business to join the GPP or SPP, right? And we assume that, okay, whenever we create a demand, they will respond. They will respond, but let us hear them. So let us make an effort towards that. And finally, Farid has already covered about how should be the response of the GPP especially in the view of the pandemic. So I mostly think I agree, right? And finally, I will end that the best thing when we are moving from the project-based approach to the program-based approach, which will pay you the best dividend, is invest in institution building to develop capacity. I think I will end my slide today here, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'll be happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. In any case, you will be joining us in the panel at the end, so definitely there will be questions to you later on. Still a long way to go, and focus on program more than project, look at the impact categories more than just the product, and do integrate the time factor when you work on procurement, but it requires much more time than we are planning every day on that. Thank you very much. Now let us move to the next session, which is really, as we said, the core of the program, bringing the component of the Switch Asia. And I will hand it over to my colleagues and Mrs. Lonchakorn, who in fact is the one who prepared the whole program. She managed all this. She prepared the info notes. She has been writing and coordinating with you. So she's the brain behind this session, and I want to thank her for doing this. And the floor is yours for the session. Hopefully you will be, and your colleagues, more efficient than I have been in time management.
Thank you very much, Arab, for your kind words. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Lanchakorn. So welcome to the session 2. We will be in a sharing of experiences from national support and grant projects. Since we are now 30 minutes behind the schedule, so I would like to skip a little bit the detail of the brief bio of the speaker. If you would like to know them in detail, you can also check from our website of the event. So this session, we gonna have 5 speakers from 4 presentations. First, Ms. Lauren Galabayan. She is the Senior Advisor on SCP Switch Asia SCP facility. And then we're gonna have Dr. Prasad Modak. He is the expert executive president of Environment Management Center LLP, Director, Economies Knowledge Foundation, and Dr. Thamrongrat Mungcharan. He is also our Switch Asia SCP facility expert for the Thailand technical support project. And as well for next will be Mr. Kirati Posicharan. He is executive Vice President and Head of Accounting and Finance Group of the Stock Exchange of Thailand. And the last speaker will be Mr. Kayan Andrea Paulo Garanzini. He is from Heraklion Development Agency, and he is the General Coordinator of the EU Switch Asia project on a model for sustainable tourism in Central Asia. So let me listen to our first presenter, Ms. Lauren Galabayan, to speak about the market readiness analysis, offers new insight on GSPP in Indonesia. So the floor is yours, Lauren.
Thank you, Anne. So good day to everyone. I'm Lorraine Gatlabayan from the SCP facility, and I will be presenting on the market readiness analysis on sustainable public procurement in the paper and furniture industries in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So since 2009, Indonesia has been actively pursuing sustainable consumption and production, including the strengthening and expansion of its green sustainable public procurement capacities. The Ministry of Environment and Forestry has formally assumed the role of national SCP focal point since 2013 and has been one of the initiators of the GSPP. So the application of GSPP has been made mandatory for budget users according to the 4 regulatory references shown in the slide, including the Circular Letter 16 dated 2020 on the determination of green products to be used in the procurement of sustainable government goods and services. Next slide, please. Okay. In view of the government's in strengthening SCP policies through implementation of GSPP, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry has partnered with the EU Switch Asia program through the SCP facility and the GIZ Advanced SCP. Next slide, please. So as part of the technical assistance provided by the SCP facility, a market readiness analysis for green, sustainable public procurement for paper and wood and furniture in Indonesia has been prepared. And the study looked at the current and future demand, consumption by government, and the current and future production supply capacity of sustainable paper and wooden furniture products. And the study is the first of its kind. It also provides important learning experiences for a future expansion of GSPP to other product categories, both in the paper and furniture sectors and also in the other sectors. So the report consists of a data analysis following on a compilation and comparison in government demand versus supply across Indonesia. It also looked at the mapping, provided a mapping of the supply chains of selected pilot industries, and it also derived recommendations for other subproducts. Next slide, please. So the detailed data compilation plan was developed based on online consultations with key government agencies and stakeholders. On the demand side, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry formed a multidisciplinary team of sections in charge of different procurement methods, e-purchasing tender, and for the supply side, relevant industry associations were involved, as well as selected government suppliers. In the consultation, stakeholders in the process included the National Development Planning Agency, Business Competition Supervision Commission, and the Ministry of Industry. So this analysis also provides inputs for the refinement of the GSPP technical specifications, as well as the inputs for a joint GSPP long-term action plan, which is being supported by the GIZ Advanced SCP program, NOCO Institute. So we have with us also GIZ, and if we can have also Kai Hoffman to provide inputs as they are part of this endeavor. Next slide, please. So the market readiness analysis findings and analysis are divided in 4 parts: mapping of government demand, mapping of industry supply, GSPP risk management, and findings on challenges for the operationalization and acceleration of GSPP. So the findings show that secondary data is scarce, scattered, and difficult to obtain even in well-established industries. The analysis also showed that on photocopy paper, the industry is ready to supply eco-label certified paper, even if the budget users do not actively apply the GPP criteria for the procurement. It showed that all photocopy paper companies are both SLK verified, and all their products carry the eco-label certification, which is according to the current GPP requirements. On wood and furniture industry, there was mixed opinion based on the data gathered, but there are sufficient actors in the market that see sustainability certified government demand as a business opportunity and are ready to manufacture and supply such goods tailored to the specifications set by the budget users, with clear guidelines provided by for compliance. Next slide, please. So in addition to the stakeholder landscape and supply chain, the analysis also mapped the environmental and social hotspots and some mitigation methods provided to determine which supply chain segments of which product groups and respective supplies have specifically high social and ecological risk. For example, in the supply of photocopy paper, there are several threats are faced upstream, and at the level of pulp and paper manufacturers, environmental issues include the high consumption of water and energy, while the problem at the user side mainly comes down to product and packaging residue. Next slide, please. In the supply of wooden furniture, some of the major threats faced upstream also include conflicts with local communities around the forest area, but also work safety during the wood processing. So the problem faced at the user level is product and packaging residue. With the required sustainability specifications, the government intends to create a market signal to increase the incentive for responsible and accountable businesses. Next slide, please. The findings also show that the application of GSPP criteria in public procurement has mandatory character, despite having been introduced a requirement for GPP, the SVLK system effectively covers environmental, social, and economic criteria. So in the figure shown, the social and environmental compliance aspects are mapped by the respective stage of the supply chain that they cover. It is also good to note that the timber legality is an important aspect for the supply chains of both product groups based on the data gathered. Next slide, please. So the analysis also looked at challenges for the operationalization of GSPP on the supply of green sustainable products. The industry perceived that the intention for green sustainable government procurement is an interesting business segment and a market opportunity. So they are willing to supply government based on clear guidelines for compliance. On government demand, it showed that there's a need to raise awareness among budget users on the products, environmentally friendly products, and also the need to build capacity for them to be able to apply this knowledge in the available procurement methods. There's also a need to change perceptions that sustainable products are more expensive and to pursue a merit-based system and not award decisions based on the cheapest product. Next slide, please. So on recommendations, the report showed that there are 9 action areas identified to operationalize and accelerate GSPP. In general, it is on 3 aspects: on institutional capacity building on the demand side. There's a need to increase the capacity and understanding at the budget user level, and also both at national and regional levels on environmentally friendly products and practices, including the sustainability certification schemes that are available. On communication dialogue on the supply side, there's a need to provide timely and complete information through various channels to inform the public about the government's procurement plan and procurement specification. Continuous consultation platforms are also recommended. And lastly, continued support mechanism for companies, especially SMEs, are needed for them to obtain the SVLK certification, especially in the view of the COVID-19 recovery. Increase the publicity of the available support options is needed by disseminating the information through available channels, and for industry networks to increase the number of SMEs to become suppliers of green sustainable goods. So the report also provided additional sustainable products as recommendation, and 5 possible products were proposed by different stakeholders, such as rattan, bamboo construction material, or tissue paper, cardboard, among others. Next slide, please. Also, the recommendations advised on GSPP monitoring focused on basic guidelines and on giving the priority on actual implementation and keeping it simple before incorporating more complex monitoring methods. And other recommendations show that they move from a transactional to a partner-based relationship between industry and public agencies. Next slide, please. Yes, so the EU through the Switch Asia program has been strongly committed to work closely with our partners in Indonesia, especially with the ministry. And I believe that Pak Adi, Noor Pak Adi Wardoho is with us, so he can be able to share and expand more on the implementation of GSPP in Indonesia. And this partnership is also provided the platform for several SMEs and industry players and organizations to come together and discuss and see how we can move forward on looking at better implementation of GSPP. We also have GIZ Advanced SCP, so Kai Hoffman is with us, so he could also provide more inputs, especially in terms of the development of the long-term action plan. And the report is published on the Switch Asia website, and the English version, and the Bahasa version is still being approved, and it will be soon available for publication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for the informative analysis result. I would like to hear if Kai Hoffman, do you have anything to give input in addition to this?
Thank you, Kunan. Thank you, Lorraine, for this great introduction on our collaboration in Indonesia. And that was really one of the great collaboration between two SCP projects in Southeast Asia. I would say that the pilot project that we have initiated and have worked together with the Ministry of Forestry and Environment, MOEF, with PAC-ID, has been a very good pilot project to learn on the barriers on sustainable consumption and production, and especially on SPP and GPP. Well, Farid and also Kumar said many of the very important points, and they were basically exemplary shown in Indonesia. For example, at the beginning when we came, there was a mandate for the GPP to the Ministry of Environment, whereas the mandate for SPP was given to the Central Procurement Agency. That caused confusion at the beginning. What is now the important one and which should be given? What is very important is that Bapanas, the central ministry, has jumped in, hopefully now sustainably, to coordinate the actions, because it needs coordination among ministries and it needs a strong steering group at national level and leadership, as was said before, to run the process forward. And PAC-ID has showed leadership for years, and I think now his long during engagement has finally paid out, I would say. Other aspects which was very important is, and that is also a little bit of a critical point, we have only an SVLK label, an Indonesian level at this point, which does not really include the important environmental hotspots of paper. And we need eco labels to be strengthened so that they can actually provide ambitious criteria for SVLK for paper, for example. If every company is certified anyway, we haven't achieved anything. We haven't increased any bit of enhancement. So what is needed is that we have more ambitious criteria, that the government can really lead on procuring the 20% that are the most important aspects. Another very important aspect, and I think Malaysia, Thailand very much, but also many other countries are now engaging in this, is developing actually a list with criteria and products, so that it makes easier, and then also making GPP and SPP mandatory, as Malaysia and Indonesia apparently have done it, so that basically procurers have a security. Because ultimately it's the procurer who is still very much bound to the least cost paradigm for the acquisition of the paper, and they will not easily change. Very few will change if you don't make it mandatory and if you don't make it easy for them. And that's something where we hope to be able to contribute together with EU Switch Asia and SCP Outreach, and where we are trying to develop this in the and our SCP projects in GIZ. A last word, so we are continuing to support Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand in the next 3 years with a new project which is coming up and will start hopefully in October, and another project which is supporting CLMV countries, unfortunately with Malaysia, Myanmar now being excluded, and Bhutan, to also bring eco-labeling and green public procurement and to advance the institutional reforms for this. PAC-ID, where are we in Indonesia?
Yes, thank you. And so we keep making progresses in SPP, and so it's a bit enjoying the process of working with all the stakeholders, and also dialogue with the industry is very important. And as for Indonesia, is now beginning to start with the preparing for future criteria for photocopying paper with the pulp and paper industry. This is very important for us and also for the industry, for them to prepare, and for the investment, and also the government can prepare for that. This is very important for the future of GSPP in Indonesia. and perhaps with the other, because we've been waiting for the products be ready as green, and then before that we've been waiting for the products being green and with the criteria, and okay, we agree with that. But for the future, we are anticipating that we can discuss the future criteria in the next 4 or 5 years from now. We start developing right now. Yeah, so we work with the pulp and paper industry in this mode, and it's very important to have this as model for other industry as well.
Okay, thank you very much
And thank you
for
for
your
the,
input.
and thanks to the U-Switch Asia and GSZ for supporting us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Lauren, too.
Now we will move to listen to our next speaker from India, Dr. Prasad Modak. He will present about the development of the SPP action plan for Indian Railways. Dr. Prasad, the floor is yours.
I'm going to be very brief because I know that we don't have much time. So pardon me if I just touch upon some of the key experiences in working with Indian Railways to prepare the SPP action plan, right? So let me be just on the points which are interesting and not restate what all other previous speakers have already talked about. Just to introduce to you Indian Railways and their interest in environment, the organization, which is one of the very large public sector organization in the country, has over the years carried out several activities on the environmental management, are very laudable in terms of water management, energy management, waste management. They also have a green rating system for their railway stations. And I remember that the first step we did was to look at what all has happened over the years in Indian Railways in environment. And we found that we really had to create a compendium. There's so much happening in so many areas when it came to their work going on, including even biodiversity. We also then looked at what kind of provisions already exist in the general financial rules in terms of procurement, and the provisions, what they will permit us to bring in the sustainability criteria and push SPP. There is also already a task force on SPP set up by the Ministry of Finance, which we thought was very important because this task force is supposed to provide an overall direction to SPP at the national level. But let me take you to the slide which will show you the engagement process. And I think this is the, I would say, an important point, that how does one engage with a large institution to start discussions on SPP? And remember, before even we got into talking to Indian Railways over the last 15 years has been very actively talking about at various levels that how do we introduce. In early days, GPP and SPP had done even the surveys to find the barriers in bringing on board the SPP. So here, therefore, under the Switch Asia program, we began with a scoping report to look at where are the focus areas that we can introduce SPP in Indian Railways. And this exercise was taken to understand overall in the country where all such efforts have been taken. And then we held a consultation workshop to get a direction from the Indian Railways and all other important stakeholders in terms of how do we go ahead after we created this scoping exercise. And that led to a conduct of a policy review, which we found was very important exercise. So we looked at all policy measures related to SPP and also the procurement. And we looked at also what's happening in the private sector apart from the public sector. I think that gave us even more insight that there were elements of sustainable procurement already followed in the corporate world, and they seem to have worked. So what happened there and how could we learn out of those experiences? And then, of course, the starting point of engagement was to start working with the procurement officers. So we got around 60 procurement officers. We engaged with them over 3 days. we had a fairly good involvement of the procurement division of the Indian Railways as well as the environment division. And in that process of raising awareness and giving them the skills, how does one go about SPP, what are the sustainability related criteria, what can be the bidding evaluation processes, we unfolded a draft action plan to these procurement officers and the senior officials of the Indian Railways to react to the elements of the action plan. And then we had to validate what we were trying to do by talking to the suppliers, the vendors. So we had two workshops, one focused on the products and the second on services. There was already a shortlisting study carried out by the Ministry of Finance identifying potential products. The vendor consultations gave us also a short list of what could be the potential services where we may apply sustainability criteria. And those workshops really gave us a good idea about the market readiness, their reservations, their suggestions. Following that, we got into building capacity at the National Training Institute of Indian Railways, where we did training of trainers. And these were two sessions where we trained them over a couple of hours of intense training, followed by jointly developing a curriculum. How would they develop a curriculum on SPP, which can be introduced at the induction level, it could be introduced as an upgrade course, or even for very senior decision makers in procurement. So that was conducted. And that has led now today in the draft of the action plan, which has been, developed following all these engagements. And very importantly, to the action plan, we have developed an implementation guide. Now, this implementation guide is a practical guidance that how do you actually implement SPP, taking each and every step, right from shortlisting, screening of vendors, how do you develop a sustainability criteria for a product and a service, what could be your bid evaluation procedures, and so on and so forth. So the action plan with a implementation guide will make people feel easier for Indian Railways to take forward the SPP. And now I'm going to just flash a few slides to tell you what went within the building of the action plan. So we identified the short-term objectives because we didn't want to make an action plan which takes a while, to get started. So we said, let's put something on board which can be taken up immediately. So we built upon whatever work was done before earlier, and then prepared a set of short-term objectives, and then wrote down the actions, what could be those actions, so that we could achieve those short-term objectives. And the approach was to really embed a piloting exercise, because only then that experience could be used to adapt further the action plan, especially when we want to scale it up and replicate. So that was the strategy. And then we set out the long-term objectives. In the long-term objectives, we looked at some of the interesting add-ons, that how do you encourage buybacks? How do you encourage recycled products? How do you get into low carbon goods and services? And what could be the methodologies and guidance for that, which we put in the implementation guide. Many of you talked already about the monitoring and impact assessment, how that could be done, etc. All this should ideally feed back to the Ministry of Finance's SPP task force. So then again, for those objectives, we set out all the long-term activities, and that wrapped up the action plan. So friends, I'll stop here because I'm conscious of time, but I think the main takeaway, I would say what we learned in these different interactions, that there is actually an interest, not just in terms of buyers and also sellers. You mentioned, some of you already, eco-labeling, but what we tried to communicate, that getting an eco-label is actually getting more and more efficient. And that's the advantage going to be for those who are going to comply to eco-label. Throughout these engagements, whomever we talk to, in terms of vendors, for example, we use the business language, and I think that was important for the vendors to understand that this is SPP is an opportunity and not a threat. I found also that all the good work which already happens in the organization, in this case Indian Railways, has to be brought in and communicated. Sometimes in a huge organization, it's not easy that everybody is informed what are the green initiatives in the organization. I think this often breaks the ice. So obviously these publications will be out and put on Switch Asia websites, and I will invite all of you to read, comment, and give us suggestions, especially on the way to go ahead. Thank you very much. I'll end my presentation here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad, for very informative and interesting work in the Indian Railways. Next speaker, we're going to listen to about the green integration policy and National Green Directory support upscaling of GPP in Thailand, which will be presented by Dr. Thamrongrat Mungcharan and Mr. Kirati Posicharan. So, Dr. Thamrongrat, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kun Ann. So I would like to talk about the project that supported by the Switch Asia SCP facility. This is the name of the project. Is mainstream green integration of Thailand, transformation from policy into implementation. So I will introduce the project, the objective, and the stakeholder that engage with Thailand in the project. A very short introduction, and then Kun Kirati, the Vice President, Executive Vice President from the Stock Exchange of Thailand, will give implementation, talk about the implementation of green and sustainable procurement in the private sector that has been adopted, in the Stock Exchange of Thailand. So the project is during June 2020, will end in August 2021 with the partner of Pollution Control Department, ONEP and DEQP. They are under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. So today I talk on the behalf of the Pollution Control Department, which is the main stakeholder that foresee this project. Next, please. The objective is to enhance the procurement of Thailand and also study how to cluster the products and services to be more product and services in the basket, and also develop the policy and action plan. We also provide knowledge and information. We build, make some video, some booklet on this, and share experience within Thailand and also with other countries in ASEAN. So the expected output will be the draft policy action plan and the National Green Directory that we will work closely with the stakeholder in Thailand, increase awareness, and also strengthening the SCP network in Thailand and also in ASEAN country also. Next, please. So this is the, we divided the project into two phases. You can see the detail in the handout later on. I believe that it will be available through the EU Switch Net website. So this is the phase one. It's about 6 to 7 months. We will have a revised draft on green integration policy and the National Green Directory. Next, please. Phase two, which is starting this year until August. We have a pilot project. We use the revised policy and plan, and then working with the pilot project. We pilot with 3 stakeholders. The first one is the central government, which is the Pollution Control Department, the organization that enforce on this, have a policy. We pilot in the local government, which is the Langsit City municipality, and also we pilot with the private sector, which is the Stock Exchange of Thailand. They have a member, several members, which is a private organization across the whole Thailand. So this pilot project is during March until May. And then we revise the policy plan and everything, and then we will disseminate, to the country again. So the output from this will be the final report. We have the booklet and the video media and the green integration policy with the National Green Directory. Next, please. So with this, you can see that we start with the study the best practice from EU, from Asia, from North America, from South America and also from Africa. We study the gap analysis, stakeholder consultation, and also we propose and clustering the product and services in the Green Directory. You can see from the bottom that we have proposed the National Green Directory for the product. It's not only type 1 labeling. We have if we don't have the product in that category, we can go to the level 2, 3, and 4 for the products. For the services also, we have level 1, 2, 3 in there. That means, dark green, light green, something like that. And also from the experience, we propose the IT platform to facilitate the procurer, and also we plan to have the vendor list, later on, which is to facilitate the procurer on this. Next, please. Okay, so this is the target 3 pilot organization with the central government, the local government, and the private sector. When we work on the pilot, we, trying to see that what number, what product they have purchased on the green product. And then we trying to increase more with the policy and plan that we study, and also with the National Green Directory that we recommend. So there are a lot of opportunity to increase that, and also the greenhouse gas reduction from that 3 project. So we study the best practice from that, and then the opportunity for improvement. So next slide, you can hear from the private sector that working with us, Stock Exchange of Thailand. So Kun Kirati, please.
So the part of our story is that we want to be part of this because we want to see this as a reality, and we are happy to collaborate with your organization. So can you go to the next slide, please? So the part we are doing is we work on this project since January to June, and we pretty much aim to expand the green procurement practice to private sector. As Kun Tamlongrat mentioned, we have about 750 listed companies. So we would like to be a role model for the other organization as well. So during the past first half of this year, we review all our procurement data by using the information in the 2020. We get the seminar, and then we got some know-how. And then we do some pilot testing to see if we can increase the amount of green procurement in our organization. So this includes both products and services. And the next phase is we will monitor and access the results, and then we will collect all the lessons learned. So if you go to our next slide, I would be happy to share about what we did for develop green products and services spec. So we look at the different product categories and try to maximize. And as someone has mentioned that we also work on the construction materials, because we think that is a big portion that we have overlooked so far in the past. So if we can make this green, it can be more responsible for the environment. So these are all the list of the products that we work on. Okay, all right. So after looking at the procurement in the 2020, we can see that only 76% of our procurement is green. So we analyze, and by using the new framework, we think we can target to about 88% of the procurement. The lesson learned that we learned from this pilot project is that, if we got the good guideline, we can support the implementation better. And also, if we improve the data collection and reporting, it will be very important for the implementation. And for us to develop the comprehensive vendor list, it will help the user in our organization when they decide to procure something. It will be more helpful, and then it will help us achieve the end goal better. And last but not least, we have included transportation services and construction services. As I mentioned earlier, because this has been overlooked, and this is a major portion of the procurement that we can incorporate into our practices. So what the final word that we would like to, if we get the commitment from the management level and the policy, and we set the clear green procurement targeting, we set an annual target for successful implementation, so we can monitor our progress. And afterward, we will continue to improve on the procurement system continuously. We get the guideline from the Green Office in 2017, and onward, we also get some framework from Carbon Disclosure Project and also OECD to get a good guideline on what we can enhance, what our existing procurement operations. So these are all the information that would be helpful. So we hope that our experience will be helpful for the other participants. Well, thank you.
Before ending the session, I would like to thank the Switch Asia that support this project. Thailand start the government green procurement since the year 2008. We have been practices under the leadership of Pollution Control Department for several years. Now, it's the phasing that we would like to have the green integration policy and also the National Green Directory, which will bring us forward, working with the local government and the private sector closely on this. So thanks again. If you have any question or comment, we can happy to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thamrongrat and Mr. Kirati very much for the sharing the activity about the implementation of GPP and the policy for a National Green Directory, and also very impressive for the private sector to involve in the pilot testing of the project. Next, let's move on to our next speaker, Mr. Gayan Andrea Paulo Garazini from Heraclion Development Agency. He will speak about the implementation of SPP in the tourism sector. Please, Gayan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lanchakorn. Thanks for the invitation. First of all, it's an honor for me and for the grant I represent. So, greetings from the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, from the city of Heraklion, on the mythical islands of Crete, where we are doing our best in order to implement a very interesting Switch Asia grant program called a model for sustainable tourism, building capacities, creating awareness, introducing technology. The acronym is MOST. I decided to hand out to you a richer, quote unquote, and more comprehensive PowerPoint for you to read and to understand the philosophy of the grant program. Of course, beyond the 7, maybe 8 minutes, I will present you the work we are doing with this grant. As far as I'm concerned, I can say that the purpose of the meeting is reached today. I have learned lots of information that we can use in our grant program, and of course, I shall learn many more before it ends. Which are the main objectives of the project? As you can read, supporting tourism companies in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. These are the 3 countries where we are implementing our Switch Asia grant in order to adopt sustainable consumption and production practices by providing appropriate knowledge and ICT tools. We also have the objective of supporting regional and local authorities to plan and implement policies that assist the development of sustainable tourism. So it's not only for the private sector, but it is also for the public sector. Raising awareness regarding sustainable tourism and consumer awareness about sustainable consumption is a 3rd objective. And finally, we have the strengthening of the dialogue between authorities, SMEs, and end users as far as SCP is concerned, because this is a chain and sorry, all stakeholders must cooperate. The main focus area is the promotion of a well-structured model for sustainable tourism in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan in order to contribute to preserving and strengthening local culture, heritage, and traditions, while also protecting the natural environment. This is the big advantage, I would say, or incentive of sustainable tourism, which is on one hand to favor tourism without damaging what is tradition, what is local heritage, and what is local culture, which is what often happens with mass tourism. We want desperately to avoid this. Beneficiaries, we have lots of enterprises, more than 440 in the 3 countries. We have 30 local and regional authorities, consumer associations, local communities, tourist SMEs and professionals, end users of tourism services and products, chambers of commerce, of course, and business intermediary organizations, which all contribute in the industry that we call tourism. So the MOST program does not come unexpected nor uninvited, and I explain myself. The policy framework is now ripe, is now ready in all 3 countries to adopt sustainable tourism practices. And the tourism industry, of course, is ready too. Why Heraklion Development Agency? Why so far? Because Crete, as you know, has a very good tradition in that, has a very strong worldwide brand for sustainable and green tourism, and we hope that we can share and transfer the know-how and the technologies, of course, because we also talk about technologies. From process to action, there are some expected outcomes and practical deliverables, of course. I am not reading them through. It is not necessary, and time is not very much. But what I can say is that there are many tools that will be innovative for those countries. For instance, you can read now the promotion of access to finance for SMEs, for MSMEs, sorry. This is a classical sustainability tool because we want to, after the program is over, to let them with practical tools in order for them to survive, quote unquote, after the grants and be able to move independently on the tourism market, and of course in this case on the financing market. And you can read also adoption of green procurement procedures, but we will talk about this later. The impact is strong. This is our hope, at least, at technical, social, and policy level. The impact will be considerable, but what we want most of all is that such impact might be measurable, first of all, and replicable elsewhere, mainly with regards to resource efficiency, climate mitigation, and the change in behavior, the change in mentality of people addressing or working in the tourism industry. Our legacy goal is that measures and knowledge conveyed by the MOST grants program to shareholders represent a start, not a finish. After 36 months, things will be just getting started, not things will be ending. And this also has to do, of course, with sustainability, but this also has to do with the capacity that the project leaders will have, together with the participants, to understand that this is a lasting progress. It's not that you eat today and then you are done. No, you just prepare for the future of your business and of your industry in general. There are some priorities, of course, that we follow. The action is aligned to the SDG 12 objective, which is responsible consumption and production, as we saw As we saw before, it is related to the European Green Deal, and it especially relates to the priorities of mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy, of building and renovating in an energy and resource efficient way, of preserving and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, and of a zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment. There are, of course, other priorities which are more specific, more technical, I would say, the adoption of EU environmental standards in policy making, but also the environmental management ISO concerning monitoring of water, energy consumption, and indoor comfort parameters. This is applicable mostly to hotels and small hotels which participate to the grant program. And of course, we want to, as I said before, to change the attitude. This is a very ambitious goal, of course, and a very ambitious objective towards sustainability. Communication is vital. If you do not communicate something, it's like you never did it. We have a meeting about that in a couple of days with Sara Gabay, who's following us today. Ciao, Sara. At the SCP facility exclusively about communication in order to come up with a communication strategy all partners can rely upon. The tools are the traditional, of course, but we need to be creative and innovative, I would say, on that. And of course, as you can see, we have quite a good budget for this information and communication strategy. We just don't want to waste it, not only because it's wrong, but also because, as I said before, communication is not just a small part of our program. It's a huge part of our program. Countries are difficult countries. They're very vast countries. We don't work with the capital cities only. We try to work with the whole regions. Communication is not easy, and the COVID-19 does not help because we cannot travel, we cannot move. So communication is more important than ever in our project. So the second part of my presentation will concentrate more about the topic of today's meeting. I presented our grant program. Now let's see what our grant program does concerning sustainable public procurement. Based on UNEP and EU guidelines, we both heard about them today. The program holds practical classes on SPP where all sustainable tourism stakeholders, public and private sector alike, are invited. So far, we had 2 sessions with the beneficiaries in all of the countries, meaning 6 sessions overall. Green procurement has been addressed also during workshop and roundtables in 2020 and will be a matter of further training both in 2021 and 2022 until the end of the grant period. EU and UNEP experts will be invited from this year on in order to enrich the panels. SPP is a subject most wants to train its participants on. The content of training is the usual ones. You know about that better than me. We base ourselves on the SPP life cycle approach, and of course this SPP approach has the goal to create policy framework, has the goal to encourage public authorities to move towards more sustainable public procurement, using the legislation they have, but often, let's say, in order to do that, the central government or the regional government need the input from the local authorities, or even more the people that daily would work and would improve their business with green procurement. So this feedback is very important for us, and we try to create it somehow. And then I would conclude my presentation with 2 words about environmental certification. Without that is like eating a salad, I would say, without any dressing. environmental certification is very important today, and what most conveys, what our grant conveys, is that we try to explain what environmental certification is with the standards that exist. We talk about standards, we talk about EMIs, environmental management initiatives, and we really hold classes about that. 3 examples, you can read it on my presentation: ISO 1401, the corporate social responsibility, which is which is something new for most of Central Asian countries, but it's something which we can help them in developing very effectively, I hope. And of course, the Hotel Carbon Measurement Initiative, because I repeat, many of our stakeholders are from the hotel and accommodation sector in general. And then we talk about environmental action plans. We want to create an entrepreneurial environment where the SMEs automatically do business thinking about environment, including environmental action plans in their annual strategy plans, also on the basis of what we heard today, that is to say, labels, certification, green procurement, and sustainability as the ultimate goal, because the project title, I repeat, is Model for Sustainable Tourism. Some examples of the objectives that we give our stakeholders with environmental action plans are to reduce emissions, to minimize raw material usage or abuse sometimes, to use recycled products where it is feasible, to reduce unplanned releases, and to reduce energy consumption, which is very important for a business. We also follow the policies that you all know very well about at European level, the Eco-label and the EMAS for environmental verification. And of course, you can see on the right side all the logos of the global sustainability certifications, which these countries are really starting to be familiar with. I am finished for the moment. I thank you very much again for the invitation, and well, I'm here for answering any questions but I will be delighted to continue cooperation with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guy and Andrea, for your presentation. For the participant who may have the comment or question, I see that you have posted on the live chat, and thank you for the expert who comes and can reply on, because we have a limit of time. So I would like to close this session and let us move to our last session. I hope that we can finish by 5:40, because our colleague has to go for another important appointment as well. So now let's move on to the panel discussion session. We have 4 panelists, including Ms. Vilasini Punut Apai. She is the project coordinator, project co-director of the GIZ Thailand, and yeah, she was also the project director of EU Switch Asia funded project on sustainable freight transport and logistics in the Mekong region. Next is Ms. Sylvia Aguilar Camacho. She is the senior consultant procurement advisory service procurement group, UNOPS, headquartered in Copenhagen, Denmark. And we have Mr. Philip Tepper, senior coordinator from ICLE Sustainable Procurement Capacity Center, and also Mr. Sanjay Kumar, our speaker for the opening session. He will also join the panel discussion and represent the Asia Pacific GPP network. So before we start, I would like to invite Ms. Sylvia Aguilar Camacho to give some input about the challenges and opportunities to leverage the GSPP implementation. The floor is yours, Ms. Sylvia.
Hello, good morning, good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation. I will be talking about challenges and opportunities, and challenges and opportunities at a country level. My experience is for about 15 years, 14 countries in Latin America in the implementation of sustainable procurement, particularly in Central American countries. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges that I saw, unfortunately, is this losing momentum. Back then, I was working in a local NGO, and I remember all the time on all the meetings and everything that went into making sure that the country had a law that promoted SPP or a decree or a policy for the implementation of SPP. And after the big celebration or the being so happy about having this sort of thing, then the implementation part was not as easy. Maybe because there was no external pressure, or because the everyday operations of the institute made it difficult, or the no allocating resources particularly to this, thinking that you could do it in half time or some spare time that you had. And that's something that is but it was very unfortunately, because in many countries we saw that it was a lot of work getting to that point, and then it went down. So it's important to remember that SPP is based on continuous improvement. So it's not only the monitoring, which of course is super important and you should do, but continue implementing activities, particularly capacity building and monitoring. They are a must, because you will need capacity building for training, for developing guidelines, for networking, learning from peers, etc. And other projects that are aimed at enabling conditions, because as you know, SPP cannot work by itself. We need other enabling conditions, access to finance, technical assistance to SMEs, you name it. So it is important to continue driving the implementation. And of course, checking, improving, which means that after a certain period of time, you should revise your plan and even take a look at your policy. It might be necessary to change it. But in many cases, it became static. It was the plan, a little bit of doing, and then the initiative was, in some cases, kind of lost. And in some cases, it's still moving, but so slowly that it might be necessary to review the plan completely. Lack of resources is a big issue, particularly in developing countries, and you will need resources for market engagement, for this training that I've been talking about, for this developing of guidelines, including criteria, for monitoring and other types of support. And in this case, if I may say so, the recommendation would be to build up on existing resources. I think someone else before me mentioned the importance of stakeholder engagement. And it's not only a stakeholder in the sense of the Ministry of, say, Finance and Ministry of Labor or the Ministry of Environment, but also with other stakeholders in the country, like, for instance, universities or the cleaner production centers or research centers, among others, that can support you in these developing guidelines or training or other activities. Because let's be honest, we don't have in developing countries excess of resources, so we have to make the best use of the ones we have. And this challenge about continuing training, is something that it caught my attention last week. I have the link over here. I'm sure you will have the presentation so you can download this document on the main challenges in the implementation of GPP in the European Union that the European Commission published last week. And I thought it was very interesting to see that even though the European Union is at the forefront of GPP and in general SPP implementation, still today the lack of specific knowledge and skills of public servants is a challenge that is recognized. So just having one course on sustainable public procurement will not be enough. You need knowledge in a variety of topics, and remember that public officers go in, and for whatever reason, then they change over time. You have new people, so it has to be a continuous practice to do this training, not a one-off. Another big challenge in the case of developing, particularly in the case of developing countries, is the lack of compliance. Is a basic weaknesses, and sometimes it's not recognized. It's not a secret that many countries, even though the law says, for instance, that you are not allowed to dispose of certain type of waste, people still do it, or that you are supposed to pay this minimum wage, or that you are supposed to provide these social security allowances, or etc. People might not do it. So including the support to the current law is something that we cannot jump from assuming that everything is okay and then going towards I don't know, I'm making this up, biodegradable cleaning products. And maybe the cleaning products, that the regular ones that are sold in the market, are not even legal. That's something that we should take into consideration. That's something I remember seeing in one country in Central America at the national court. Imagine, it was actually a high level organization from the legal point of view, and the cleaning products that they were buying, they were not registered at the Ministry of Health, which was a basic requirement. So what about sustainable public procurement if even the regular products were not complying with the legal minimum environmental and social, which was another big issue? They were not complying with those. So it is important to recognize that things like minimum wage is procurement of local woods, local wood products. I saw one that they were asking for a species of wood that it was a banned species, and it was actually the public sector itself requiring that in a tender, among other things. So it is important to recognize that we have that as a big challenge. Another big challenge is that sustainable public procurement can cover a lot of topics, a lot of impacts that you might want to have, from the purely environmental impacts, purely GPP, to other areas more social and even in the economic arena. So it's very important, first of all, to have clarity on what are the impacts that we are prioritizing. Not that all of those are important. Of course, all of those are important, but what are our priorities? And once we have the priorities, what are the sectors and what is the reality of the sectors in our country, in the particular country that you are implementing? So just including criteria and tenders is, of course, is not enough. We must consider the market, or what is the reality of the market in our country. Because apart to having to adapt their offer to new sustainable public procurement criteria, for instance, in the case of SMEs, they might have to adapt the production processes, be able to innovate or get certifications or substitute materials. And this will entitle access to finance, technical assistance, training, etc. So do we have those conditions, or are we going to require sustainable procurement and then leave the SMEs out of the market, which of course is an effect that we don't want? Even though in many surveys, public officers cite the lack of sustainable products or services as a barrier for SPP implementation, it's also interesting to see that most countries, they do have SMEs capacity building or support like institutes or the Ministry of Economics or whatever it's called, that they are in charge of increasing the capacity of SMEs. But sometimes there is no coordination. What the SPP programs is asking is not exactly what these other institutes are promoting on the SMEs. Yeah, that's my last point, that there is no coordination about these two type of initiatives, which I think it would be very important, particularly because we don't want SMEs to be left out. Once we have these priorities, it's very important, as I mentioned before, to understand the sectors that we are trying to prioritize and how is the marketing those sectors. Because it might be the case that only big companies can supply. You are not going to give a small company the construction of a highway. It makes no sense. They don't have the capital to do that. But still, even if it is a type of tender where only big companies can supply, how can we reduce the environmental impact throughout the supply chain in that particular procurement? How can we increase supplier diversity? Can we promote subcontracting, either voluntary or mandatory, like in some countries it's mandatory? Or how can we make sure that human rights and labor laws are respected? And if some other diverse companies can supply, say SMEs or women-owned businesses or whatever it is that you have defined as priorities in your countries, still, how can we reduce the environmental impact throughout the supply chains, because they do have supply chain? How can we support these supply diversity programs? And still, and also, how can we promote human rights and labor laws, even if they are small and medium-sized enterprises? They will have, of course, the workers, and we want to make sure that we are promoting responsible companies. And this aspect, that whether we can rely only on big companies for certain tenders, and in some others we can rely on small, even micro companies, it has to be analyzed in conjunction with how is the environmental or sustainable management, for that matter, of that sector, of the companies in that particular sector. Because in some sectors, even within the same country, in some sectors, they might be quite mature, let's call it, from the sustainable point of view. Maybe they have standards, they have labels in the products. It might be a sector where, from the sustainability point of view, they're ready to take that challenge of giving us a sustainable offer. But even within that country, in another product, with another sector, we might find out that most companies are micro enterprises, and they can barely make it to the legal requirements to be able to submit a tender, to submit an offer. So in that case, it's quite clear that our strategy has to be different, because we are talking with companies that are, how are we gonna make sure that they are able to compete, and that we are not going to give all our businesses, because a public procurement is a good business, to 10% of the market, like in the table below. That is maybe the one that could offer green products, or that they have some environmental management system. And there are many strategies to support suppliers, but as we can see, some depend on the public procurement, say authority or agency, like streamlining procurement processes, or making sure how do we present those tenders, like if you do multiple sources or other strategies. And some other strategies might require us to involve other stakeholders, like, for instance, financial assistance of subsidies, or some maybe we might need to make an alliance or an agreement with banks that they provide financial assistance to SMEs that want to compete, or technical assistance, or some other type of programs that are not within the control or within the area of control of the public authority. So that highlights the importance of this stakeholder management beyond the three typical ministries that we might see, labor ministry, environmental ministry, and maybe the procurement authority, other stakeholders might be necessary to make sure that sustainable public procurement initiative is successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for your input. So now we're gonna start our panel discussion. As I received a message from Philip that he is going to leave very early, so may I give the first question specifically to Philip? We already, as you work for the ICLEI and that involve many local communities, I would like to ask what are the roles of the cities and local communities in promoting GPP and supporting the green recovery? And do you think how the private sector and local communities involved in the GSPP?
Thank you so much, Lanchakon, and thanks for the kind invite to speak here. Thanks for also speeding up and allowing me to pick up my daughter from the kita very soon. That's the reason why I have to rush out very soon. Sorry for this. Those two questions are of key importance. So what's the role of cities or local communities, so the hub between city and the region, right? So where you can feel the farmers, the good products, and the city life with the beer gardens, for instance, here in Freiburg. And I thought about this question, Bert, and I want to tell you a bit of stories. They are leaders, they are role models for others. And that's basically our role, what we, as ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, work on for more than 25 years in the field of sustainable public procurement. We want to find those little sparkling seedlings that grow into a nice plant on sustainable public procurement. So my stories will be positive. I recognize all the challenges around this, but my stories will be positive, and that's also, I think, a message that's important to tell. Sustainable public procurement is not something lame, boring, comprehensive, or whatever. It's a fun fact. It's a really good thing to do. Yes, it needs political leadership, and we see public authorities, particularly cities, where certain schemes and mayors and support schemes, institutionalization levels. So, for instance, something there's a team at the city of Copenhagen directly below the mayor, right, working on the implementation of sustainable public procurement. Not about policy making, well, it's about implementation, and it's about monitoring, about contract management, and knowing what actually had been achieved. And they report directly to the mayor. There's nobody in between. Those type of institutionalization, we see, of course, benefit certain things, but it's also about the little success stories by each and every single public procurer that gets out of the remit of somebody just buying something, applying a legal measure, and so on and so on. No, public procurers are more valuable resources in your jurisdictions. They are valuable resources. People that have much more to do than just go with a shopping list somewhere and buy your Mercedes-Benz. Sorry, please delete this from the recording. Yeah, so it's about being a role model there, also strategically. And that's interesting what we see from different kind of world regions, how they apply this. At ICLEI, we launched a global lead city network on sustainable procurement. So you have also some cities from the Asian region, Quezon City, Seoul City, but also from Australia, US, Europe. And they all do approach this type of topic of strategically embedding sustainable public procurement in their jurisdiction differently. And this is one way I would like to highlight there. Never doubt on the potential and power for exchange and knowledge exchange in those type of things. Therefore, we at ICLEI also promote a lot the city match scheme that we run in our networks, and job sharing opportunities, and just keep on with this momentum that Sylvia just mentioned, that we see, of course, a big shock currently with the pandemic, and also a shock to procurement systems. Some did cope very well. Those are normally those that have a strategic embedding, and others just fall apart. And you bought cheaper stuff, and you end up with masks that fall apart when you try to wear them, right? Yeah, I mean, part of this happened in Germany, in my country, so I won't basically say that this is all great here. But it is important for, when thinking about green recovery, to think about this aspect about quality. It's something you purchase, it's something on quality. And it's more and more important to witness there that there are certain costs associated. And please don't be shy to use a award criteria to make clear you want to have quality and not just lowest price and then 2 months afterwards, you have to replace the unit, and it's basically not the lowest price; it's the highest price that you purchase. Basically, yeah, typical things. I want to say a word on COVID-19 pandemic. Also, as part of we are co-chair of the One Planet Network on Sustainable Public Procurement program run by the United Nations, and there we also have a pledge to take recovery program seriously, but not only from a green recovery perspective, but also from a just transition perspective. We see a lot of discrepancies between different countries and regions, societal groups. So I very much appreciate that Anna Lupi from DG Grow mentioned also issues about socially responsible public procurement. It's a big topic, an important topic. It's well established in Europe and in some other world regions, but it's lagging behind in many, many regions. And it had been mentioned before. So basically there we all, again at Economies say, oh, we tell you, not we tell you, but we take you on a journey to understand what this means in reality. So we show you places how to work with people facing disability, or what does design for all mean, or what are fair supply chains, and what can you do as a public procurer, and also focusing, for instance, in the very complex ICT change and ensuring that labor rights are met, such as labor standards by the International Labour Organization, ILO. One very interesting story I want to quickly share with you is around training the trainer and sharing of experiences. We had once a Procure Plus Awards featured NHS, National Health Services Wales from the United Kingdom, as a winner in the category furniture procurement. So they refurbish furniture, right? Simple thing you might sort of think, but it was a very whole complex process. It had a lot to do with having a good eye for what looks good and it's attractive to the people to use. It's not refurbishing, basically recycling, and it's looking ugly. No, those type of refurbished furniture for the office buildings do look, wow, they really look great. They won this prize. And we brought this story to China. And basically, China took it up in one of their districts there, Tianjin New District, close by Beijing, close by 3 hours. There in a multi-million metropole, they included award criteria supporting these type of schemes, refurbishment, right? Design elements. These is important first steps to take on, and a great story for also international and global cooperation. There was a word said about business, and also a question you asked me about private sector. And it has been mentioned before by Sanjay and also other colleagues. It's important that you talk to the business, because otherwise it's a failure. Whatever if you call it public procurement, if you call it sustainable public, green public, if you don't talk to the market, it's a failure. So what we have also stories, and also together with the European Commission, a lot of European Innovation Council-based initiatives that we really appreciate there, is involving more pitches outside of a procurement, so pre-procurement outside, involving more e-pitches, and those days it can be organized very well in our series of online events, and there to really focus on the needs of a public sector authority where they do not know the result yet. Just to give you an example, this morning we had an e-pitch together with the European Commission with Wiener Linien, which is basically the public transport provider. And Farid mentioned this earlier, that's a key important aspect, public transport, right? So basically there's a key question, what do we do now? We have really reduced numbers of passengers. We have increased security and safety standards. What do we do? So how do we rebuild our systems there? And they ask the question not only to themselves, fine, they ask themselves, they have a team working on innovation and things like that, but they also took the opportunity to raise this question towards SMEs and startups delivering innovative products and services that are partly on the market, maybe a little bit lagging behind, but very interesting. And there was a 1.5 hour session, and it was great, really great results of those companies really providing insights and tools. And it's a public event, right? So basically, you can witness what is happening there. It's not about business details. It's not about, in the end, about how much does it cost or what's the price behind it. And it was really interesting to see. I would like to encourage you to test such schemes also in Asia. I would be ready with the whole eClay network to support you in this regard. That's for me answering the questions. I have maybe 2-3 minutes left to stay, but otherwise I would already excuse myself for running out very fast. Thank you again for the kind invite.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much for sharing interesting story and highlighting the importance of the local communities and that they are important for leading the SPP. Is there any additional comment regarding the answer of Philip? Okay. If not, thank you, Philip. And yeah, if you can stay with us a little bit more, 4 minutes, it will be great. Next question, Kun Vilasini, I would like to ask, could you please introduce about your projects and supporting the GLSPP, and since you are managing two projects in 9 countries, so how has been going, and what are the common challenges and opportunities for the implementation? Please unmute your microphone.
Okay. First of all, thanks for inviting me to share my experiences. Of course, that as Kun Ann and Kai Hoffman already mentioned, that GIZ now currently supporting 8 to 9 countries in Southeast Asia to improve and develop GPP policy framework and also its implementation. Mainly that we support the government agency to improve their capacity, of course, that in various aspects like legal framework improvement, the guideline or strategy for GPP implementation development, and also including the eco-labeling. Because if you work in the GPP area, you might understand that the eco-labeling also is important as a one instrument that can foster the GPP implementation very well. So I think that the project cover 9 countries in 2 projects. So the first one on advanced SCP, which is already ended since this year, and we have another project currently running, is namely SCP Outreach, which cover like Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Bhutan. So actually we work for 8 to 9 countries. But even the advanced SCP already ended, but we are requesting the financial support from German government to working more in the what you call another 4 area like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, because we still do see that there is also many challenges and the gaps remain, that we can support those 4 countries to move forward in their to crop their challenges. So I think that we're still working on in this area. Of course, that for almost 10 years, actually, I think I would agree with Sanjay when he said that we should not work on the project base. GPP is need a reform, and actually it requires a time consuming. It's not like 2 or 3 years and then gone. So we have to put or embed it into the national agenda and make time sufficient for reform the policy. From almost 10 years that German government supporting this 8 to 9 countries, of course that last year we have gathered some challenges, then I think that it probably would be useful or benefit to all of you that we might share some idea with you. Of course that previous speaker already mentioned several challenges, but I think it's also, I would like to address here that what we found after 10 years working in this 8 to 9 countries. I will try to make it short, because I think actually we found like we categorize it in 10 or 15 challenges, but I think we don't have enough time to mention it all, but maybe I share just a solo point here that I think it will be useful for you. The first point that I would like to address here, that we found that there is unclear reform mandate and also institutional capacity. Of course, that we do see GPP is a green reform, and such is mandated to like agency responsible for environmental protection. For example, Ministry of Environment. At the meanwhile, the Ministry of Environment has its own limitation in terms of influencing on the procurement processes and also the coordination capacity to unite the public actors. This is one side. Another side, we have to think about the budget for public spending and also procurement guideline or procurement registration, which mandated to Ministry of Finance. And if we look at another side, we also have to look at the GPP system like product criteria setting. And of course, it requires market participation, the green product development, and also incentive, which also under Ministry of Industry or Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You see that there are so many different stakeholders in this landscape. And if in the country it lack of multi-ministerial cooperative mechanism, that also can create some kind of the obstacle to the GPP implementation. We have to think about the complex and long process of the GPP reform as well. Thinking Thailand, for example, I think Thailand has been implementing GPP since the first phase, like 15 years ago. So now I think it's still in the process that how we can utilize GPP and embed it into our national agenda. So still working on that. So I think it's a long process for the GPP reform. This is the first point that I would like to share with you. The second point, I think, look at on the ground for the procurer itself. They still have some kind of least cost paradigm for public procurement and capacity gaps for public procurer. Also, the GPP or SPP policy in many countries have started to integrate the so-called value for money principle or life cycle costing into the procurement procedure. But in practice, I think it's still difficult to make a change or change their mindset. Most of the procurer or even the decision maker always still justify their decision within the financial audit, meaning that they look at the accuracy of the financial record and also to ensure that there is no privilege cost has been included in the procurement processes. What does it mean for this? This might put the procurer, the implementator on the ground under the pressure and also lack of confidence to put the clean criteria into technical specification, because they're afraid that this might, if they put the clean criteria into the specification, then it might, the auditor might interpret that this is the privilege case and create untransparency problem for them. So that's why they're afraid of that and lack of confidence. And also, most of them still lack of the capacity for implementation. For example, like the knowledge, the unclear technical guideline, the time constraint, and also the personal resources. That is also included in terms of the how we can encourage the procurer on the ground that they're able to help us to implement GPP. The third one that I would like, or third point that I would like to share with you here, I think also the one speaker already mentioned here about the high upfront cost for sustainable product. I think the previous speaker already mentioned that also is the obstacle for GPP implementation. I think since the development or procurement of sustainable product often require higher upfront investment for procurement authority, while its life cycle cost might be lower. What does this mean? This means that the saving cost can be only realized over time. And if we consider only the purchasing price at the present as a core criteria for procurement, then the green product may not able to compete with the other conventional product. That would be one of barrier or challenges for foster GPP implementation. The fourth point that I would like to mention here, of course, I would like to a bit link to the eco-labeling, because to implement GPP, you need a green product available in the market. However, this green certification and labeling require and what you call the substantial registration, institutional and capacity development. In some country in Southeast Asia, I think we still lack off this capacity. Like of course that we're thinking about laboratory, we're thinking about the certification or verification process, which also require knowledge and the fund to attribute this kind of infrastructure. And of course that the demand of the green product in the market still missing. Of course that most of the people talking about the green product, but when it comes to the decision making, either buy or not buy, of course that the awareness of the people still lower. And when the consumer has the low awareness, it's difficult to generate the demand to the producer. That's how they can adopt green practices in order to access to the better market. So I think that it still be like chicken and egg problem for this region, that either we work with the producer first to promote the green production, or we work with the consumer first to create the demand to the market. It's still, I think, a chicken and egg problem in this. Of course, I already mentioned about the inefficient infrastructure, because to get the certified or green certified product, it requires a technical knowledge and also like infrastructure, like laboratory, harmonized technical standard, third-party verification, and also auditing procedure. And this also, I think, a problem that for the producer side, it creates the high cost of certification and also the lengthy of the process. Like when they apply for the certificate, it might take, I don't know how many months, or in some country maybe a year, that which is unaffordable for the smaller company. That I think I would like to mention 4-5 area here first, and maybe in other speaker, they might have some add-on to my presentation. So thank you, Ka.
Thank you for very clear information about the challenges. So is there any point to add from the floor or from our panelists? If not, I would like to ask Mr. Sanjay, as a representative of the Asia Pacific GPP network, what do you think how the international or regional network can support or fulfilling the gaps of the GeoSPP implementation in countries?
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia, for the nice presentation and your intervention. It was really great. Yeah. So coming back to question of how the network can support GPP implementation, I just want to say a small story of how the Asia Pacific GPP network came around. In 2015, when we were discussing, how to mobilize the forces in the different part of the people in Asia Pacific, and set up a group, so that exchange of knowledge and ideas not only takes place only in the the boundaries of the conference hall or the workshop, but it flows all around the years and on a continuous basis. So I liked what Sylvia said. It's very important to maintain the continuity, right? And when in 2015 the idea was floated, and one LinkedIn group was also formed in 2015 where people were invited, but hardly few people could join the LinkedIn network. And finally in 2019, after a gap of I will say early 20, after a gap of 4 or 5 years, South Korea chipped in, and they decided to fund this project, GPP Asia Pacific GPP network, right? And so that's how again the network has come into being. But again, this is last only till 2022. So what happened? What happened between 2015 and 2020? And again, what will happen after the 2022? Right? So that is where the continuity of whatever we are doing, as a network, or if we are trying to establish a, kind of institution that can support the GPP implementation in Asia, we have to consider continuity of the organization, continuity of the flow of ideas, continuity of saying of the knowledge, right? It's not one kind of a event that, okay, today you do the GPP, tomorrow you forget it, right? So we have to maintain the continuity. And, where is ICLEI? ICLEI has been, at the very forefront in bringing the GPP policy in the European Union and European countries. Do we have a kind of institution in Asia? No. Right? So we need to build. You have SPLC in the USA, in North America, where the best minds on social public procurement, they are part of that organization, and they exchange information on a regular basis. So where is that kind of institution in Asia? We used to have one IGPN, International Green Procurement Network, that started sometime in 2008, and it was led by the great I forget the name, a gentleman from the Japan, right, who led the green purchasing procurement in Asia, in fact, and he was a very pioneer, in fact, very front runner in bringing the legislation on GPP in Japan. But after 2008, for 2-3 years, it functioned well. And again, as a part of the IGPN, many countries, like in Malaysia, you have Green Procurement Network Malaysia. Thailand, you have Green Procurement Network Thailand. In India also, you have Green Procurement Network on Green Procurement Network India. But most of these networks, except 1 or 2, is only on the website, right? Since 2010, I tell you, no single event has taken place or organized by GPN India in the last 10 years, right? So where are the institutions? And we have not invested. So that's why when I said in the beginning, we want to move from the project approach to the program approach, where we focus on the GPP, on a project basis. This is a good, it's a good to focus on the basis of project. But at the same time, we need to have a program where we can build the institution, right? Where we can build and address the supply side, Again, Sylvia brought out the point. We are not focusing on, and in fact, Philippe also brought out the point. We are not interacting with the business as much we should be doing. Right? We understand again that, okay, whatever view we have, and we know everything about the business. That is not the case. I'm sure once we start interacting with the business, much more, fruitful idea will come, and it will help us, taking forward GPP in the Asia. So with these words, I'll say thank you. And if there are any other questions, I will be glad to answer. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjay, for your answer. Any additional comment from the floor or from the panelists? Oh, okay, Kai.
Thank you very much. I very much agree that we need more regional approaches to GPP, and especially now in Southeast Asia, where it is currently booming, with us being present in 9 countries and Switch Asia being present in all the countries. We really have to push together to bring it to ASEAN level, because when it comes to criteria making, when it comes to policies, that would be a fantastic approach to go more to the ASEAN level and doing mutual recognition, developing common core criteria and the like. So I very much hope that we will get funds, and that either GIZ, EU, or whoever can influence the ASEAN level bring it to the ASEAN level.
Thank you, Hoffman. In fact, that's a great suggestion. EU Switch Asia is there, and there are a lot of funding agencies who are working and operating in the Asia Pacific. So why don't they come together and institute a network or institute a institution, which can work on a long-term basis, on a program basis, and they are able to create the local leaders, local people, you know, and we need to understand the procurement, right? How the procurement works. So unless you address the problem of the people who are working in the procurement, you know, it's very difficult to implement and move forward on SPP. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So my next question will be to Sylvia. Sylvia, if you can think of any of the good practice to overcome any specific challenge, what would you think about in the SPP implementation?
I think mostly have been said already. The stakeholder engagement, you know, that has been said before, that is not a project that can only be run by the procurement authority, or as we started in Costa Rica, first with the Ministry of Environment, and then, you know, is it an environment project or is it a procurement project? Is both, and then labor, because we started integrating the labor rights and decent work and other aspects. So it is very important to be open to other stakeholders and leverage from their capacity that they have, because as another colleague mentioned, the legal aspects are very complicated, and we need to have as many people on board. The planning is very, very important to be able to prioritize and do a realistic plan about what is it that we want to achieve, what are our expectations. Engaging with the market, super, super important. I mean, it's not a public project, you know, a public sector project. The private sector has to be involved. Of course, we do acknowledge that public procurement has to have its independence from the private sector, but nevertheless, there has to be engagement with them, and there are ways to do it. And I think someone else mentioned it also as well. There are many guidelines out there. There are many manuals, guidelines, examples of criteria. There are many out there. If you Google it, you will find thousands of documents. Don't copy them. It's a very bad idea. Use them as inspiration, but develop your own, because every country has these different, you know, aspects when it comes to public procurement, different things when it comes to rules, different realities in markets. And I've seen at least one example when someone, you know, basically almost copy-paste and changed, and it didn't work. You know, it was a waste of resources. So it's better to, of course, don't reinvent the wheel. We can always learn from other experiences. That's very important. But make your own guidelines appropriate to your own countries, to your own public procurement regulations, and the reality of your market. And as much as you can, participate in other networks, because you will get the knowledge and the insight on what has worked in other countries and why it hasn't, in case you want to adapt it to your own. And there are many networks, very interesting. Sanjay was mentioning eClay, and there is One Planet Network, and SPLC, if you have the chance. Just try to learn from other peers, and hopefully, there will be one regional network. That would be even better. So that would be my final remarks. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvia, for the answer. Well, actually, this question is just popped up in my mind that among the list of the challenges that we have heard, what do you think will be kind of like we can tackle it within like 6 months or 1 year? Which challenge is possible to do? Any idea or answer on this? What do you think?
Idea that you mentioned, maybe the planning.
No.
Yeah. You know, I just want to make a point on Sylvia. You know, she flagged very important point. You know, you Google, you have several documents available. You can copy paste the plan and you can copy paste the policy, right? And you can have a state-of-the-art policy in your country or in your organization. But the problem is, you know, practices can't be transposed from one country to the other, right? Because when you are, focusing on the practices, then you have to deal with your own national legislation, your own organization rules, and your procedures and so on. So that cannot be transposed from one country to another. Say, for example, in European countries, very, almost it's a common, or I will not say it's a common, but the people are moving towards that they are including GHG criteria into the, procurement decision. But can we, integrate the same criteria in the Asian countries? Probably no, because most of the countries in Asia, they do not have EPD legislation. Unless you have EPD legislation, and all the manufacturers are, obliged to give the, quantify how much is the GHG emission, throughout the life cycle of the product. How do we integrate that? So it's a very, and it's very good to, copy and paste the, legislation or policy, but it's very difficult to implement in the practice. So let us focus on practice part, and let us give emphasis on the practice part. Thank you.
Any more comment? Okay. I think we have been very late today. Sorry for the participant, and thank you so much for staying with us until this time. I hope that we had a very good discussion and information. So I would like to sending back. I want to close this session and send back to Arab. Arab, over to you for wrap up. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, we have been already very late, so thank you. I will not be long. But as it has been for the other similar events, and I said it earlier, it has been impossible for us to stick to 2 hours. And finally, our average is 3 hours, if not more than that. But fine, I mean, we still have many participants. It shows that is of interest. We have been able to put many speakers together. And the interest was here to exchange, to learn from each other. And as it has been said at the end, I mean, learn from good practices, don't copy paste, adapt them to your context, and then from there, see how you can implement, how you can adjust, how you can develop. So learning from others to adjusting to your context in order to move further, cut and paste will be just a dead end, and you will not move, you will not implement anything. Just a few words there. Working on public procurement is really a powerful market force, and people have to understand that. It makes good business sense if you do it properly. It will ensure to the effective public expenditure. It's on the rise in all the region, in many countries, but there are still a lot of difficulties in moving ahead. We're on the right road. We just have to keep up by effectively learning from each other, networking, adjusting to the local context in the context of green recovery, which is really an important opportunity. We need to focus on some driving sectors, which are really the ones where we can make a difference, that are building, transport, and energy efficient product. It has been repeated by several. Procurement cannot be done overnight. It cannot be done through a project. It needs a program. It cannot be done in a couple of months. So we need to factor in the time in the transition period to move further on that. But we need to be consistent with our messages. We need to change properly the perception and communicate consistently about what we know, how we can do it, engage the different stakeholders in the process, and speak the language of business if we want effectively to move on procurement, because it engages demand and supply, and engaging all the different stakeholders that have to be working all together on that. Otherwise, we will lose the momentum. We have to make sure that things are followed properly with a good monitoring system adapted to the resources that we have in order to move next step, and to make sure that the right concerned actors are well informed, are enabled, are trained in order to be able to do it, without forgetting the bottom of the bottom, and most important of all are the small and medium enterprises who will be delivering those products to the consumers when they will be asking for green product. So Keep on associating all stakeholders. And I like the expression of, and this is the case in procurement when it comes on eco-labeling, the chicken and egg issue. Is it first the consumer? Is it first the product? We have to work on both of them, and depending on the country and on the context, effectively we'll see how to prioritize them. So learn from each other. Thank you for networking for each other. Adapt to your local need and context, and we all together, we can make it. And we from EU Switch Asia and other partners, we stand ready to do our share in this handover and to work together on that. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Anne, for organizing this event. Thank you, Anne Unyarat, for on the backyard, and thank you for all the team in doing this. Thank you all, and have a good evening, and sorry for the 1 hour delay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
สวัสดีค่ะ
Bye. Bye.